Greetings and welcome back to my channel for another video. Again, happy Monday to one and to all. Perhaps it is Tuesday, depending upon where you are on the globe. Again, give yourselves a round of applause for making it to and through another day, because as we know, each day is a blessing. So, without further delay, let us get into another chunk of news, which is again in the state of Maryland, which is part of the DMV. D as in David, M as in Mary, V as in Victor. Washington, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia. This case is a high-profile case and definitely one to set a precedent. I was actually in the courtroom earlier this year, and I had a moment to speak to a state senator and one of the lawyers in the KILMAR GARCIA case. Now, for those of you who may not be familiar with this particular case, let me give you a little bit of background. KILMAR GARCIA made headlines when in March of 2025, he was what people deemed illegally deported back to El Salvador. But the hiccup comes where in 2012, he entered the United States illegally. Now, KILMAR GARCIA is a Salvadorian national. There was some confusion in the beginning where there were people saying that he was a Maryland citizen. That is actually incorrect. He is a Maryland resident. He's not a citizen of the United States. However, his wife is. As I mentioned at the top of the broadcast, KILMAR GARCIA entered the United States in 2012 illegally. And in 2019, he was granted withholding status, which meant that was a protection of having him removed back to El Salvador. He was given a visa to work, and he resided in Maryland with his wife and family. March of 2025, as I mentioned, he was deported, what the government has stated by their own admission, by error. However, the Trump administration has asserted many times that KILMAR GARCIA is affiliated with the MS-13 gang, and they believe is involved with human trafficking. And this was born from a traffic stop in Tennessee back in 2022, where it was said and alleged that he was trafficking. They also state and allege he had $1,400 on him, and that there were people in the vehicle for which he was caught. And you can see all of this on clips and videos with no luggage. The actual officer who you hear when you Google, and I implore you to do your research, says that he believed that he was smuggling people from different states to bring them to Maryland. He has been back and forth in the system. There were efforts when he was sent to El Salvador to CCOT, one of the most dangerous prisons, which he feared. There were visits from high-end politicians, to include Ivy and, most notably, Chris Van Hollen, which upset many Maryland residents who questioned at whose dime did these politicians use for travel to El Salvador to meet with and try to bring KILMAR Garcia back to the United States, back to Maryland. Now, in June of 2025, he was brought back. However, it was short lived, meaning when he went to a routine appointment, he was detained again by ICE, which his lawyers had feared. There were talks of him being sent to Uganda. That didn't happen. So the government decided, after Garcia, through his lawyers, felt that the 22 countries that the government had proposed, he feared persecution. So they came up with Eswana, formerly known as Swaziland. Again, his lawyers were not comfortable with that. He was sent to Virginia, and he has ended up in Pennsylvania. His lawyers are concerned because they feel as though the distance would hinder his ability to communicate with them. The attorney in Nashville wrote an opinion, and that opinion is what predicated what happened on today, where it looks like KILMAR Garcia may have been given a slight reprieve. Now, the word that the government is throwing around, or what's been said, that the reason that KILMAR Garcia may be targeted is a vindictive effort by the United States government, because KILMAR Garcia, by and through his lawyers, has fought back. So let's get into some of what has happened within this case thus far. So today, Monday, October the 6th, 2025, a judge in Maryland, Judge Paula Zenas. Again, I had the opportunity to see her in person, behind the bench, of course, but when the government brought on their witness, who I told you before was absolutely horrible. To his defense, he was not prepared. And again, that looked horrible for the government, because it showed, or it gave the optics of the government not really knowing what they were going to do what plans they had in place for KILMAR GARCIA if indeed he was going to be deported. So, today, again, October the 6th, 2025, Judge Paula Zenas denied the government, meaning Trump's DOJ, Department of Justice's request to delay proceedings because of the government shutdown. And I'm chuckling a little bit because in life, sometimes, and again, this goes for life in general, not just this case, but life in general. Sometimes when you lose, you may actually win. But sometimes when you win, you actually lose. So there was a conference, a status conference held today in Greenbelt, Maryland, in relation to the KILMAR Abrego Garcia case. Again, the Salvadorian national who was deported, again, by the government's own admission in error to El Salvador in March and returned back in the United States to face criminal charges in Tennessee. Again, as I mentioned just a few moments earlier, those charges stem from allegations that he is involved with smuggling. Next, here's a little bit more background. As I mentioned, Maryland Judge Paula Zenas blocked. She just said, nope, not having it. The government's request for extensions due to the government shutdown and has ordered both parties to return to court Friday, this time with a government official prepared to testify under oath about plans to deport him to the southern African nation of Eswatini. Now, as I mentioned earlier, there was a judge in Tennessee who wrote a 16-page opinion, and it reads, federal authorities illegally deported a man, then charged him in Tennessee after he fought back. A judge has since ruled that there is and this is the part that many people are poo-pooing, there is a realistic likelihood, again, that's kind of vague from my optics, but there's again, an object here that one must really, really pay attention to, and that is there's a realistic likelihood, meaning that it's a possibility that this is of a vindictive prosecution. Vindictive, as we know, is payback, is revenge. It's a lot of adjectives you can attach to it, but basically, in the grand scheme of things, it's revenge. And there are many people that say if you cross the commander in chief, he will do his best to seek revenge. Now, that is not what I'm saying. There are people who take that stance. And attorneys for KILMAR Abrego Garcia want a judge to throw out the charges of human smuggling that stems from, again, we go back to 2022, and the traffic stop in Putnam County, again, Tennessee. He was federally charged more than 2 years later. So again, he was stopped, but wasn't charged then. A judge agreed to allow Abrego Garcia's attorneys to gather evidence and return to court Friday to hear claims of vindictive and selective prosecution. That, ladies and gentlemen, sisters and brothers, that's going to be extremely interesting because, as I mentioned, I was actually in the courtroom, not the overflow. Oh no, I was in the courtroom and I witnessed for myself the government's witness who came to testify. And in my opinion, he blew it. He blew it. He was not prepared. He admitted he only had 2 days to prepare, but really put the nail in the proverbial coffin is when he said, I've heard about this case, but the majority of the information that I know about the case came from social media. That, in my opinion, and again from my experience, is something that a good witness, a government witness, would not have said. They would have been totally prepared, and information would not have been just from social media. So that agitated Judge Zenas. She looked many times like she was about to scream. So it says here, and I wasn't there today. I had to work and I couldn't take a break to go there. But Judge Zenas appeared exasperated today with government attorneys who could not answer if there was additional evidence about removal plans to Eswanti. And I hope I'm saying that correctly. I'm just going to say formerly known as Swaziland. Beyond letters sent to Abrego Garcia's lawyers. It states, that's not a tenable position. You either done it or you haven't, she said, she being Judge Paula Zenas. For those of you who may not know, that this woman she's very stern. I'll use that term, extremely stern. And she followed up with, it's not a hard question, guys. And the thing is, this is almost mirroring what happened back when he was in court earlier this year when I was out there. So next, this is just, and it's available online, but it's a 16-page opinion that was written by the judge in Tennessee. Again, you are welcome to find this online, but it was submitted on October the 3rd, which again may give KILMAR Abrego Garcia a slight reprieve. And it is said, and I'll show that momentarily, that Judge Zenas is inclined to release him. Again, this is a high profile case when it comes to immigration and deportation. And this is the last of the document. Which again, it's 16 pages, and it's a opinion that was written by the judge in Tennessee and submitted on October the 3rd. Here's a little bit of more context. Now, the hearing today, again, a status conference hearing, Judge Polizinas of the U.S. District Court for Maryland expressed exasperation at Justice Department lawyers' failure to answer, and this is in quotes, basic questions that could determine Mr. Abrego Garcia's fate. She questioned whether the government was using, again, this is in quotes, a trick bag to detain him indefinitely by claiming he needed to remain in immigration custody status because of an imminent deportation, when in fact it had not solidified any such plans. I'll repeat that again. She questioned whether the government, meaning the DOJ, was using a trick bag to detain him indefinitely by claiming he needed to remain in immigration custody because of an imminent deportation, where she states there is no solidified plans to do such a thing. And according to this report, and again, I implore you to do your research, Judge Paulazina said she was likely, again, not definitively, but likely to give the government until Wednesday to respond. I believe she's going to wait until Friday, but in this particular article, it states that she was likely to give the government until Wednesday to respond. She granted the government lawyers a 30-minute recess during the hearing to excavate proof, such as communications with foreign governments, like requests for travel documents and coordination on the potentially handling over of Mr. Abrego Garcia. But all they had was emails. I know this was truncated, but that is what the conversation was about. So again, this is a photo of KILMAR Armando Abrego Garcia, again, who was deported back to El Salvador in March of 2025. And the government did admit it was an error. However, because the Trump administration has asserted, and they have not let up one bit, that he is a criminal, that he is associated with MS-13 and is connected to human smuggling. He should not be in this country. Keep in mind, again, he did enter the United States illegally in 2012. In 2019, he was given a protection that would curtail him from being deported to El Salvador. He was given a work permit and resided in Maryland, again, as I said, with his family. In 2022, however, and this is just a still photo, but there are actually clips that show the actual traffic stop in Putnam County, Tennessee, where you can hear the state trooper say or allege or imply that there was trafficking going on. because he felt as though the vehicle had been modified. The trooper did not see any evidence of any luggage. Garcia's license was actually expired, and he had $1,400 cash on him. You could hear the entire conversation. Others question the fact that his wife in 2021 filed a DV or domestic violence charge against him. She has admitted that they had problems. However, they were able to resolve them and work them out. She stated that many couples have problems. So again, that put a hiccup in this entire case involving KILMAR Garcia. As lawyers, members of CASA, and others have been fighting tooth and nail. Again, politicians actually flew to El Salvador earlier this year. Chris Van Hollen was the first one where he was turned away initially, but then he had the opportunity to meet with him. Mr. Ivey has also gone out there, and again, he was returned to U.S. soil June 2025. He has gone to Tennessee. He has gone to Baltimore, where he came home and spent maybe a day, if that, with his family just to be detained again. Then there were talks of having him, as I mentioned earlier, deported to Uganda. So, in the actual court hearing that I attended, Paula Zenas wanted to know, okay, what plans do you have? Is he going to have access to attorneys? How much time will he be given for a final order? Those are all questions that the government's witness, really could not answer. That angered Judge Paula Zenas and made her beg to question if things or plans or even thought out at the time. And what would happen if he was detained again, which he was. So he has been to CCOT. He has come back to Maryland. He had a brief stint at the Baltimore ICE facility where he was detained. He was in Virginia after coming from Tennessee, and now currently he's in Pennsylvania, which has concerned his attorneys because of the distance. Now, Pennsylvania really isn't a long way away, but it's an inconvenience. And again, due to the nature and complexity of this case, his lawyers are just not comfortable. So, as I mentioned, the Tennessee judge believes that because KILMAR Garcia, by and through his attorneys, has decided to fight back, and he's still here in the United States. That has angered the Trump administration's DOJ, who has been aggressively trying to have him removed from the country. Now they are labeling it as the likelihood of it being a vindictive prosecution. Again, today was a conference hearing in Greenbelt, Maryland, where Judge Paula Zenas has blocked, I had to repeat that, and have you understand and be clear that the government's request to extend timelines and time frame was blocked by Judge Paula Zenas because of the government shutdown, in addition to her wanting, when they return to court, a witness that can provide definitive information other than emails. So, will KILMAR Armando Abrego Garcia be released and free to reside in Maryland after Wednesday or Friday? Or will he be subjected to a final removal letter where he'll have to go to Estewana or Eswana, formerly known as Swaziland? His fate is really depending upon what the DOJ and their witness or witnesses are able to bring to the court. And if that evidence is strong enough to convince the judge that it's enough, again, remember the dates. 2012, he illegally entered the country. 2019, he was given a protection of withholding from deployment. 2025, in March, he was deported to El Salvador, actually to CCOT, where the DOJ admitted that it was by error. However, in the beginning, the Trump administration and President Trump and Kristi Noem stated it was out of their hands and they had no intentions on bringing him back. That changed in June. He stayed, I believe, in Maryland, maybe a day or two. And during his check-in in Baltimore, he was detained. He went to Tennessee, Virginia, and now he is in Pennsylvania. Again, waiting to see what Wednesday or Friday's outcome is going to be. Again, the government has labeled him as a criminal, as being involved with MS-13, a claim which he has vehemently denied time and time again, along with his wife, family, and loved ones. Abrego Garcia has expressed concerns and fears about being deported to the countries that were offered up to him because he's not familiar with the countries nor the language or any of those outlying issues. The government, in a nutshell, feels as though that's not their problem. The government's position is if you enter the country illegally, you should be deported. And if you have a criminal past, they definitely want you out of the country. Now, again, allegations of KILMAR Garcia being an MS-13 member is up in the air because he and his lawyers claim he is not. But President Trump and his DOJ believe differently. And again, there's the infamous traffic stop that happened in Putnam County, Tennessee, where it is believed that he, meaning KILMAR Garcia, is involved with human trafficking because of the condition, how the vehicle was modified, no luggage, according to the trooper, and the fact that KILMAR Garcia had allegedly $1,400 on him. He and his lawyers are fighting to have that case, the human trafficking case, thrown out. Will that happen? Again, we'll have to see. They need to have strong evidence. Now, they claim that someone testified that he was a part of MS-13, but there has been nothing to suggest the witness who testified to this was credible. So this is where we are today. So the latest in this high profile case, which again I have mentioned is going to set a precedent as to how other cases may be treated, is going to weigh heavily depending upon the outcome of this case involving Salvadorian national KILMAR Garcia, who was deported back to El Salvador by an administrative error, but because President Trump and his administration again asserts, and they're standing on what they say, he is again a criminal. He is a member of the MS-13 gang and involved with human trafficking, that they are exhausting every resource and every effort known to them to have him deported as soon as possible. Will KILMAR Garcia and his family and lawyers prevail? And will he go back to his life living as a resident of Maryland? Or will the formal removal letter stick and KILMAR Garcia deported to a small African country, Eswana, formerly known as Swaziland? Your thoughts and opinions on number one, if the error made by the government, again, this is by their admission, should have taken place, and should it have been taken in consideration? Or do you believe because, number one, he's here, or he entered in 2012 illegally, that he should be removed just on that? Do you believe that the government absolutely should show evidence as to what they are going to do as it relates to the possible deportation of KILMAR Garcia? Is it their responsibility? Should they even care Number 3, if by chance Paula Zenas or Judge Waverly in Tennessee decides to free him, what will that mean for other individuals who might find themselves in this same situation? Will that encourage others to enter illegally, even if married to a United States citizen? Or will this deter? Do you think the government is wrong in their fight to remove KILMAR GARCIA and have him deported from the United States? Do you feel that because of this administrative error on the part of the United States government, and if no strong, clear, and convincing evidence can be presented to the judge, that KILMAR GARCIA should be set free and to continue to live his life in Maryland as a resident, not a citizen, but as a resident, as he did prior to his arrest and as it relates to the 2022 traffic stop? Do you think that case should be or will be thrown out? Again, there's no censorship here, and I'm very curious to know your thoughts and opinions on this case of KILMAR GARCIA, a Maryland man, a Salvadorian national, deported by mistake, and has been fighting to return home to his family in Maryland amid the DOJ labeling him as a criminal, a gang member, that gang being MS-13, and a human trafficking individual criminal. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I look forward to your engagement as it relates to the latest in this, as I mentioned, high profile case. I'll put this up one last time so you can look at it. So you can get the total background. Again, thank you so much for tuning in, and I look forward to your comments. Bye bye for now.